Hey there, duelists, and welcome back to the Crystal Domain. My name's Zach, and we're doing some weird crap with the camera, trying to figure some stuff out. So this is like the extra wide camera, so that's fun. So we're wide Zach today, from the wide Crystal Domain. Um, this past weekend, I went to my local card show. There's a bunch of those that have. I'm learning there's a lot of them that are happening in different towns, like all at one time. It just happened to be that mine shared a weekend with like a bunch of other people's. So my local mall hosts a monthly card show where vendors can kind of come and sell like a bunch of their stuff, and they'll buy things if you have anything of interest and stuff like that. And I've gone the last 2 months in a row, and last month was a little more successful in the Yu-Gi-Oh department than this month's was. And I mainly wanted to talk about that. And how conversations I had with people at these vendors at the card show were optimistic for the future of Yu-Gi-Oh. So let's talk a bit about that. So last month I was able to interact with a number of different vendors, and all those vendors had various Yu-Gi-Oh stuff, old things, a mix of new things, sealed product, stuff like that. It was kind of a range of things like that. And while that's awesome and everything, there was kind of like a bit of they probably didn't do well monetarily at this event because most of the vendors at these types of things are selling like sports cards and Pokemon cards and Magic cards and like the big One Piece, like the big card games that are making money right now and are played versus controversially how Yu-Gi-Oh is still really big, but I guess in the grand scheme of card games that make money for people and actually sell for high dollar cards and stuff, Yu-Gi-Oh's kind of fallen off in that department for a lot of people. And so vendors and sellers and collectors of games have looked away from Yu-Gi-Oh in recent times. And so they probably didn't do well. And as a result, this month's show, I found a single Yu-Gi-Oh card vendor. One of the ones that was present at last month's card show. And not to say that there wasn't conversations to be had that were, like I said, optimistic for the future of the game. These are people that their living is opening. They have a card shop somewhere in their local town, and they travel to these places to buy and sell and expand their collections that they can take home and offer to their local shoppers while also expanding their market to outside of their regular area by, social media and things like that where they can follow these stores, and they might have like an online vendor on TCG Player, stuff like that, and they gain customers by that avenue. So it is like a means of expanding your brand as well as expanding your collections. Um, but the one vendor that was there, again, he's not quite optimistic about Yu-Gi-Oh. He seems frustrated with it by nature in that he has a rather cool collection of old stuff. He has like I bought a decent amount of some stuff from him, and that was like first edition Labyrinth of Nightmare stuff. And that's really cool. Some nice vintage OG Yu-Gi-Oh stuff. But overall, the value really isn't there for these cards. I feel like the same thing would be mind-boggling if like first edition Pokemon stuff of like the WotC era of the game sold for pennies, right? Where what I mean by that is stuff of the first edition brand of Pokemon of like WotC's era of the game can sell for hundreds of dollars, but first edition Yu-Gi-Oh stuff of its initial run, Labyrinth of Nightmare and things like that, as long as it's not like Blue Eyes or like truly nostalgic material, it doesn't keep value, right? So for like 30 bucks, I got genuinely good cards of old era that are great in domain, like card a safe return and like things like that. First edition copies. And I spent like 30 bucks. And that's kind of mind boggling of how good these cards are and how nice they are in their old condition, like the old vintage style of the cards, and they don't hold a lot of value. So, understandably, he's frustrated that the game that he likes collecting doesn't really have a lot of value. And that conversation was not entirely optimistic overall. We talked about like tunes, and he likes tunes. He wanted to buy my QCR copy of Toon Kingdom, which I unfortunately wasn't willing to part with. And so we talked about tunes and how that's like getting new support and stuff like that. And maybe he'll be more interested in playing rather than selling, which is not a bad thing. A lot of the times when I am going to these things, I'm talking to people with the goal that they should either be interested in playing the game still, or at least not giving up on the game, right? So, in the optimistic direction of conversations I had, there was a number of vendors that would ask me what I was looking for, and I would mention Yu-Gi-Oh, and they would tell me good luck, which is like, yeah, they're not going to carry it, or they left it at home because by nature they are expecting people to come in mass for like One Piece or Pokemon, as those are like the high dollar games right now. And that's fine. That's cool. That is what's expected for like the general audience of these things. But a lot of these same people, when talking to me, they still want to have a conversation. We're people, we're social creatures. And, the conversation steered towards that they have their eye on the game still because of the upcoming full art slash overframe cards. And the main point of where I wanted to go with this whole thing is I think Yu-Gi-Oh's defining moment as to whether it is a make or break as a livable, like a game that continues to endure even further than it's gone, is being defined by this year alone, especially. And what they've done so far to get the game back out there, I think is excellent steps in a very right direction. But what's going to further amplify that is the people looking backwards now. They thought they moved beyond it, and now they're turning around. They're that meme of the guy looking at the other girl, right? They're looking at Yu-Gi-Oh! And they're thinking, oh, those full art cards are kind of nice, right? Like, they are nice. They're real clean, and they're not doing it on just, like, bad cards. Like, that's the other bonus. Is, like, a lot of these cards are, like, nostalgic, like, main character rival type archetypes that are popular with a lot of people of various generations. And these cards are, like, good for those decks. So when they get back into the game and they're like, oh man, Blue Eyes has like a structure deck that's really good for it. Oh, also, it's got super good cards that are good for the deck, and they're overframes, which look really nice with my other new foily Blue Eyes cards. On top of like, oh, they got this super minty old Blue Eyes that they had in their collection. Now they get to use that, right? And that's like the goal. Is that like I think they're hitting a nice blend of they're bringing back people to play the game, but they're also bringing people back in to collect the game and to use their collections rather than to look back and be like, yeah, that was neat, but that doesn't serve a purpose anymore, right? And I think that's like that's the goal, right? So I think they're doing really good with that. And a lot of people that I talked to today were in that ballpark of they are waiting for if we get these like serialized cards, if we get these overframe cards, and whether or not that sticks. And I think for the most part, we're seeing that it's sticking in a way that is good and bad for the community. Another conversation I had, not quite in the direction of optimistic, was a vendor where the guy was walking around looking for Yu-Gi-Oh! To buy while his other like coworkers manned the vendor for them, and they were unsuccessful at finding Yu-Gi-Oh! Like I was, right? So we were talking a bit about Yu-Gi-Oh! And how like overframes are cool and everything, and that's like the future of the game and like blah 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 blah. And generally, he was concerned by the nature that this is going to bring scalpers to the game. That's kind of inevitable, honestly. And to be fair, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a bit of a pitfall in that regard because Yu-Gi-Oh! Already had a big boom in the pandemic, like Pokemon did, and Pokemon's ass didn't fall out on it like Yu-Gi-Oh's did. Like, Pokemon is still huge. It's arguably bigger than it was than the pandemic era of the game, which is crazy to think about. And granted, I have like financial proof of this, honestly, which I can get into in a minute. But like Yu-Gi-Oh was also another game that exploded in the pandemic, but the bottom fell out of it in terms of the market, and so a lot of that super high value stuff has pitfalls, and a lot of like the value is not quite there like it used to be, and that's for sealed product, that's for regular product. A lot of that can contribute to Konami, which is not printing valuable stuff for a while, and they've gotten better at that clearly, but like there was a bit there where it felt like they just didn't care about the collector, and like all they cared about was vomiting out product that like the competitive player would use, but not like collectors, right? And that doesn't sell product beyond what Konami makes. And that led to a lot of vendors leaving the game because buying a case of a product was a guaranteed loss, and they would like bankrupt themselves on trying to sell Yu-Gi-Oh sealed product. So why would they try? And I think that's like super valid to get out of a game that's not actually thinking about you as a vendor, as a seller of their product. Instead, they're only looking inward at like, well, we've already sold it. Who cares? And it seems a lot of that attitude has shifted away from that at Konami, where we have like the reports that they're wondering why no new players are coming in, and they're worried that people like are not getting into the game. That's a good concern for like shareholders to have, and I think that's a good voice to have in a room full of suits that like should be told to get people into the game. And they've made good strides in that regard with like the modern decks, the legendary decks, the reprinting policy of the legendary like rare collection stuff. I think is allowing people to get like their hands on multiple copies of powerful Staple League cards to get them caught up in the modern era that normally that would have costed like thousands of dollars in the past. And instead it's just like, well, you can go get the modern decks off Amazon for $30. And those are three decks with excellent reprints that give you some of the best cards in the game right now, and you can just use those. And that you can go win. Like in our Discord, one of our fellow creators, Lavender Labs, was pointing out how a person topped like a WCQ qualifier with arguably a pile of cards from the modern decks, like a $30 deck that topped a WCQ, and that's like unheard of, right? I feel like I got off topic, sorry, but like the main point was scalpers are inevitable, and I think that's like fine because they're not gonna enjoy their time here. I think they're not gonna enjoy their time with Yu-Gi-Oh, honestly, and I think that's fine. I think they're gonna come in and then they're gonna make big bucks, and they're not going to, and they'll leave and they'll go back to Pokemon and infect that further, and they'll go into One Piece and watch that continue to struggle further. And like things like that, right? So I'm not really that worried about scalpers with Yu-Gi-Oh! Mostly in if we don't even get the serialized cards, the value just isn't there, right? Konami has not confirmed that we're getting serialized cards from these overframe card releases in the US, in the TCG. Those, if they end up exclusive to the OCG, then we're going to get overframe cards, but not their Grandmaster variants. And while that is unfortunate, that might just be a nature of that they're leaving it exclusive to their main market being the OCG and not the TCG side that is currently a bit up in the air, right? It's a bit up in the air about how Yu-Gi-Oh is doing in outside of Japan. And maybe they're a bit concerned about, putting in the effort to put out these things, and it doesn't help the game, right? Where I think they're more focused on getting the TCG out to new players and returning people and getting them to play the game, and not about collecting it. Where in the OCG, they already have their audience, and with that audience, they can incentivize them to like get some bling, right? With the big bucks. But those serialized cards are selling for a lot of money, more than like the average card goes for. Like we're talking stupid money for Like I was with conversations with these vendors and stuff. I was talking with one that is exclusively Magic that was like running the event, and he was talking about like that these serialized cards for Yu-Gi-Oh are like unhinged because Magic has serialized cards that are like numbered whatever, and their value gets kind of high, but not like where these Yu-Gi-Oh cards have gotten. Like these Yu-Gi-Oh cards, it is like unhinged to the value they're at. Where you have like the Dark Magician one, it's not even Dark Magician Girl. It is a spell card with her on it, and it sold for like $25,000. And then I think like I saw a thing like Ruxin was talking about it, where another one, whatever, probably like a Blue Eyes one or something. Camera, work with me. Uh, blurry, the blurry domain. Um, Unedited videos are fun where you just yap at the camera. Um, but like there was like a Blue Eyes one or something, right? That like sold for like $50,000. That's ridiculous, right? Like that's you don't Magic cards don't do that much. We're talking like $50,000 is like Black Lotus money. We're talking like Black Lotus with Sharpie and piss on it, and it's still $50,000. Like, that's crazy money. And granted, there's other card games out there that like have stupid money in it, like some like random niche sports card that sells for like $1 million, and you're like, sure, it's got a guy on it, why not? But like that $50,000 for like a Blue Eyes card, I imagine it's probably the Blue Eyes one, but like, man, that's crazy. And the idea that those could come here, obviously, I get the fear of scalpers by like serialized cards selling for 5 digit, let alone if like the issue being is like with this stuff and how card games affect or the markets and stuff. I could see a future where we watch a serialized card in English go for triple digits, and that's wild, right? These are cards that like I don't think were meant to be that valuable, and here they are. And there's clearly a market for them, so that's cool, I guess. I guess there's still a lot of money sitting in Yu-Gi-Oh, but like maybe old money. I don't know. But like the so that was like one other angle was that the serialized cards are kind of unhinged and people have their eye on it. Was my main point is several vendors were talking about that they don't really do Yu-Gi-Oh now and they've done it before and they're kind of looking backwards at it for the nature of these overframes are like a big deal, right? But then there was one vendor that I went by like 60 times. They had one Yu-Gi-Oh card for sale. It was a like nine, like a PSA 9 CD Chaos Emperor Dragon that I thought about buying. And they were like really trying to get me to buy it. Because every time I went by, they were like, it's still here. And I was like, oh, I kind of want it, right? But I didn't do it by nature of it's a slabbed card and it's not a deck master I use, so why would I buy it? Where like I could see a future where I use like a like if I have a slabbed card as like a deck master, I think that's kind of a flex. Like I have this like this Korean Rainbow Dragon, right? That's like a PSA 9, whatever. Like I could use this as a deck master and that'd be kind of sick. But like because I like could actually do that where CD, like, it got eroded. It sucks. So, like, why would I use that as a DM? And then it would just, like, sit here and be like, neat, that's a PSA 9 CD that I don't play. Fun. So not for me. I'm not really huge on slabbed cards, really. But, like, one of the things was that they were actually a shop from a near-ish location to me that is, like, really new. They picked up, like, the ashes of another store. Like, this guy just, like, left it, and they picked up the, like, remnants and they're kind of trying to put it back together. So they're having a hard time like firing various types of card games. But they have product for like their local people that like they're dedicated to try to get them stuff. and so they only bring stuff to this card show that they like have excess of. So they just happen to have like a graded Yu-Gi-Oh card for sale, and they were talking about that they want to fire Yu-Gi-Oh events at their area, but they haven't quite been able to get people interested. So I like sat with them for a bit, and I like was giving them advice about like kind of like where Yu-Gi-Oh's at in the current time and what works and what doesn't work, and like just kind of working with people, being mentally prepared that the average returning Yu-Gi-Oh player is from 2002 and they do not know how the modern game works. And if that's the person you're working with, it's a good idea to try to slowly get them in. And there's new product that's really good at doing that. Like the 5D's Legendary decks and the Modern Decks 2026 with the Mitsurugi, Sky Striker, and X Saber decks are excellent at helping new players. And I highly recommended those products to them as a cheap option to lend out product, right? Lending out decks is a great way to get people into a game. Regardless of if it's us is shilling domain to people randomly, which I've done in recent times, and it's kind of worked. Like side tangent real quick, I actually have kind of infected my LGS a bit. My LGS is like exclusively Magic, but like there's people there that when I bring domain with my girlfriend, we're like we'll play domain, and they'll be like, "Wait, is that Yu-Gi-Oh but Commander?" And our LGS is like mostly Commander people, and I don't like calling it Commander because it isn't actually Commander. But there is the unfortunate thing that it does work to get their attention, and then I take that attention and move it to what it really is, right? So if I get their attention by them thinking it's Yu-Gi-Oh but Commander, then I'll go, yeah, it's kind of like that, but this is what it actually is. And then they have interest because they think about like their deck from 100 years ago, and I'm like, well, yeah, you can actually take that and like modernize it and run all these cards, and boom, you have a deck. You're ready to go. And with a couple people, I've lended out decks, and they've had express interest in getting into the format because they could build like zombies or dragons or whatever, right? And that's like super cool. So I've been able to do that with a couple people, not really trying to do it, but it just happens to work, right? And so I think a parallel here to tell this, small store trying to grow was obviously lending decks is a great way to help people get into the game because they don't have to buy it, right? Now, of course, that's not smart with a card store that's trying to make a living, but if you need people to come in, that way you can actually just host events, and that's what you're trying to get right now, then I guess if profit be damned, it's second place. You do lend out product, that way you can at least fire events for the game you're trying to get people into. But I have hopes for that store. I have their card, but it's downstairs, so I can't even shout them out right now, unfortunately. But yeah, it's a local store to me, and I'm really hoping that they are able to, get stuff going with Yu-Gi-Oh for them, and that's like really exciting. But yeah, I think, like I said, Yu-Gi-Oh is being defined by right now more than ever in this year. I think 2026 as a overarching movement, right, will be the deciding factor in Yu-Gi-Oh, at least in the States. And whether that is if it continues to pick up new people and bring back old people, that not like bring back returning players, right, to the game. Does it succeed in doing that? Does it succeed in retaining new players? And does it lift off further in the collector space by having these high value, rare serialized Grandmaster cards, overframe cards, things like that? Like, does that kick off a new wave of Yu-Gi-Oh craze in collectors? And if it does, cool. If the game continues to be focused more on inward to its player base and is about playing it rather than collecting it, that still means people are buying product, right? Because if the cards are good, that's like the big step, is if the cards are good, but they're also valuable and they attract collectors, you have a set that can hold its value. And that is good for Konami, who wants to sell this product, and even better for the vendor, for the LGS, for the player that is looking to get into that space. So, like I said, right now, this entire year, this exact moment in time, is where we will see if Yu-Gi-Oh continues to swim or does it sink. And we'll see what happens. I would like to thank all of you for being here with me through this entire yap section. Um, just wanted to yap, honestly, and I thought that a general topic about the game would be relevant to speak on. But most importantly, thank you for your time watching my videos. If you would like to further support the channel beyond just your time being given to me to watch this stuff, you can leave a like, leave a comment down below on your thoughts about like where the game's at, overframes, where you want the game to go, what they could print, what you want to see on the channel as well, any input on that, things like that, all that. Obviously, lay it on me. I love interacting with people. You can comment, we'll yap together, right? And of course, you can subscribe to the channel, and if you hit the little bell thingy, you'll be notified about all other future uploads that will pretty much mostly deal with Yu-Gi-Oh! And Domain and things like that. There will be a link in the description for the Domain format server and the Discord server. Go ahead and join that and get up in there and learn about the format that is the best way to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Kinda, yeah. Other than that, thank you for watching. I will see y'all in the next video. Until then, peace.